Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, the region's longest-running public affairs program. Legislative Report is a weekly review of activity at the state capitol featuring lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for viewers to call or email their legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, WDSC News and Public Affairs producer Greg Grell. The Minnesota legislative session is nearing its final weeks before the May 19th adjournment date. This is your opportunity this afternoon to call with questions for the lawmakers that represent you. We have two phone numbers that you can use. Locally, dial 218-788-2844. If you're calling from outside the Duluth Superior calling area, we have a toll-free number, which is 1-877-307-8762. Now, when you call, a volunteer will write down your question, and we'll get to as many of those questions as time allows today. You can also email your questions, and that email address is askmlr@wdsc.org. Now it's time to introduce the legislators who are joining us in the studio. We have a full panel today. Representative Jason Metsa, who's a Democrat from Virginia. Also here, Representative Mary Murphy, a Democrat from Hermantown. Representative Mike Sundin, Democrat from Esko, and Representative Erik Simonson, a Democrat from Duluth. And thanks to all of you for being here today. Kind of a blustery, windy, wet day, so I expect we have a lot of viewers. Hopefully we'll have a lot of questions today. Let's just start out talking about what's left to do this session. And Representative Metsa, I'll start with you. I've been hearing some talk from some lawmakers saying that perhaps the session could wrap up before the deadline. What's left to get done right now, the major bills that have to be passed?
Well, I'd say from my understanding, we're down to bonding and some general policy that's got to make it in. I know a few of the lawmakers sitting here tonight still have a few bills left, and then we've got to get through the rest of our budget bills once they get passed back from the Senate to either concur or make some modifications, go to conference, but I'm guessing a few of them are in conference. So.
Representative Simonson, the House has revealed its bonding bill, but we haven't seen the Senate bonding bill yet. And there's also been some talk about raising the number or maybe including more money in the bonding bill. Where's the bonding at right now in your knowledge?
There's a lot of talk still about the target and what that's going to be and what it's going to shake out for the minority party. But I think we're going to see the Senate version either tomorrow or Tuesday. And then by, whatever that tells us, we'll at least have a better indicator. But I think we've been told that we'll probably start having some good discussions on bonding this week because we are running out of time.
Representative Murphy?
Well, I think we haven't seen the House bill.
Okay.
We've seen a House bill and an author's bill, but we have not seen the House bonding bill yet. And that hasn't come to the floor.
Okay.
And so until we get the target that Representative Simonson's talking about, of how much they're for sure that the governor's willing to sign, the Senate has agreed upon, and the House has agreed upon, of how much bonding is going to be in it, and if there is going to be cash, how much cash, or what is the total, the bottom line. Is it $850 million or is it $1 billion? We won't see either bill. And so that could come soon.
Now, in your experience, is this, it's getting kind of late in this part of the session for the bonding bill still not to have been revealed, isn't it? I mean, you only have a few weeks left to go to get it all worked out.
No,
That's
it's not
typical.
late. It's
Okay.
We're still far ahead of our schedule, even though we started over a month later than we've ever started before. We have worked steady from the beginning up to the spring break. Spring break is over, and now in the next week and a half, the other bills that have to be funded will be through. The supplementary finance bill has already had 4 conference committee meetings, and at each meeting they have made significant progress. And so I think we're far ahead, but not far enough so that what you're talking about is that we may be done before the end of, before our constitutional date. I think it would be foolish to anticipate that we will, but it could happen. But we're making great progress. We're ahead of where we've been many years. And there's a new attitude. There's an attitude of working together, and there's an attitude of what's the best for the most Minnesotans.
And Representative Sundin?
I think it'd be good to remind everyone right now that that $850 million mark that Mary had mentioned, most of that was agreed to last year in the House. And we're ready to move on the bulk of that bonding number. But the governor is willing to up it a little bit with some one-time spending above that. And I think that might be a good balance with this surplus. We've got some tax breaks going back. We can put some more money in reserve, but it might be a good idea to do some one-time spending with that. And I'm in agreement with the governor on that.
And Representative Metsa, there's even been some talk of spending some money just directly out of the surplus money rather than bonding for some of those capital projects. Is that moving at all, or is that a possibility?
I think from what I've heard, the discussions are there will be a cash injection and the typical bonding. And so I hope that our Republican colleagues actually really come to bat. There's been a lack of investment, I'd say, over the last decade in bonding. There's a lot of projects that have come up over and over and over again around the state, and I think, you know, funding those now, getting them off the table, and the needs of the community don't change much, and there's a lot of stuff that has backlogged, and I think if we can get over that hump of the $1 billion mark, Arnie Carlson, if we looked at the dollars in today's value, passed a bonding bill well over $1 billion. So I'd hope we climb north of that and make some of those investments.
Representative Simonson, this might be a good time too to just explain, when we're talking about a bonding bill, what the state does to get that money, how that works, and then so we talked about some of the money maybe being a direct cash injection, but how does bonding work for the state? What do they do?
Sure, and you know, the nice thing about the cash, if there's an influx of cash for some of these projects, is that there's a lot fewer rules when you spend cash on a project than when you sell bonds and go through that process. So it allows us to bring in some projects that we might not normally be able to fund through the typical bonding process if we're allowed to use cash. But typically, you know, once we set a target, and then the bills will come forward kind of within that target, and of course the final bill that gets signed by the governor will have a number of projects in it, but essentially the state will sell the bonds and use the revenues from those bonds to fund the project, and then we'll continue to pay those bonds back over a number of years, and that's typically the way that it's done. But I'm hopeful for this cash influx, because one project, for example, that would benefit from that would be the Wade Stadium. If we bond for that, typically under bonding, we're going to be tied to some stricter rules that will not allow us to do some of the things that the city wants to do down there. But if we're able to use cash, we'll be able to get that done a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficiently.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation. And you are watching Minnesota Legislative Report. Great opportunity this afternoon to call in and get your questions answered here by our local lawmakers. Representative Sundin, now we were talking a little bit before the show. You've got a bill that's going to be coming before the House, responsible bidding bill for contractors. Talk a little bit about what that bill is about.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background first.
Sure.
The first bill that I wanted to forward was, and it was introduced, was a debarment bill that would prohibit contractors from that have been involved in criminal activity or non-payment of wages, that type of thing, to completely debar them. But it was a cumbersome thing to do, and an idea came forward that let's set up a criteria in the bidding process. So you have to provide just a one-page statement that says you haven't violated labor laws, you haven't you've paid your taxes, there's no liens against your business or your property, that type of thing, and then you're able to bid on state projects. So if a contractor is in fact has a clean record, away they go. If there's some problems there, the state of Minnesota doesn't have to receive their bids. And I'd like to compare that with the freedom that individuals have for when they spend their money. You know, you can go to Angie's List, or you can go to the internet and research who you want to do business with. But the state of Minnesota has been compelled to take the lowest bidder, lowest responsible bidder. We've just defined the responsible bidder, and we're going to hold them, hold their feet to the fire. And it's not a witch hunt against bad contractors. If they've already proven a good track record or a bad track record, I think it's a good piece.
Now, this bill has obviously already gone through the committee process to come out to the House floor. What kind of support has it had? Are you seeing bipartisan support?
Bipartisan support. I expect a couple of amendments to clean up the final language, but I'm looking forward to having that pass on Tuesday through the House.
All right. Thank you very much. We have a call from David in Two Harbors, and Representative Murphy, we addressed this issue a few weeks back, but might be some new viewers out there. He's wondering, is it really necessary that we have a new building for the legislators in St. Paul? She's talking about the Senate office building, when we already have so many government buildings in the Twin Cities. That's David in Two Harbors is wondering, Representative Murphy, about that.
Well, David, I think, yes, it's necessary. When you think about, it's not a new building for the legislature, it's a new building for the state of Minnesota. The legislature is in St. Paul, the capital, just like the county courthouse is in Two Harbors for Lake County. The courthouse has many functions. The state capitol has many functions. It is the people's house, and the people need more hearing rooms. The people need more access. The legislators that are housed there now, if they're housed in another building, they will have more hearing rooms, and that will free up more space in the Capitol for public functions and for the days on the Hill. If you've been to the Capitol on any given day in February or March, there are at least 4 or 5 or 10 days on the Hill. And there are hundreds of thousands of people that come through in a week's time. And on a daily time, there are probably up to 50,000 people that are there looking for their senators' offices, looking for their House members' offices. And the legislators are trying to get through to get to the House chambers and the Senate chambers and the governor's office and the Attorney General's office. And then all the media and the Historical Society are at the Capitol also on those days while all those people are there. And then, in addition to that, there's maybe 12 different school districts from across the state that are sending their 6th graders to the Capitol for their 6th grade trip. And so there's 100 kids from those 12 places that are intermingled with all these other people that are at the Capitol. There's a rally in the Rotunda, there's a rally down on the first floor in the Great Hall at the same times. And the building has been functioning very well, but it is time to get some of it out to another building. Some of it is in the state office building already. We have fine hearing rooms in the state office building, so don't have our hearings at the Capitol. But the Senate needs more, and in the new building, it is planned that there will be 3 hearing rooms that are larger than any hearing room in the state office building or the Capitol, and that's what's really, really needed.
So then more public can be there for those hearings.
That's correct. And keep in mind, the next question you're going to ask is, but it's just a part-time legislature. It very well may be part-time legislature. And we have part-time staff in the sense that Representative Metsa and Representative Sundin and I could all be sharing one legislative assistant. But that legislative assistance that working for the 3 of us or working for any three representatives is working there for 12 months out of the year. Our research staff is working there all year long. The nonpartisan staff is working there 12 months of the year. And so people call and expect answers to their questions all year long, whether we're in session or not. And we have to have a place that's available for them to work. And that's where the Senate staff would be working from, is in the new building. And so, David from Two Harbors, I really think it is time. And let's come into the 21st century and let's make the Capitol the people's building for another 100 years. And that's what the point is. We've got it down from the amount of money has been reduced down from 90 million down to 76 million, or in the 70s. And it's being planned differently than it was at the beginning. It is not a palatial, sparkly building. It is going to be a functional building, but it is going to look well with the Capitol.
All right, and Representative Sundin, you had something.
Well, it's never a good time for government to spend money on government itself, but Mary makes a lot of good points, and back to her points about the staff being crowded into some of those areas in the state office building. I can't even find some of those people there. I've been there a couple of years now, and they're shoehorned into some of these back alleyways in the office building. And it's just a shame that they would have to work under those conditions. But as far as my office, I'm quite happy with it, and I'm down there a couple times during the week, even when we're not in session. But there's a lot of other people that work there that could use a modernized building there.
All right. Representative Metsa, one thing happened this week that surprised a lot of people. Suddenly the medical marijuana bill started to move. I believe the Senate committee passed it. Don't know if the House has dealt with it, but what's happened? It looked a while ago like the medical marijuana bill might be dead, but now there seems to be a new life for it.
I think some conversations took place in the Senate, and they thought it was time to move forward. I haven't actually had a chance to talk to Representative Moline about what the plans are in the House. I guess that'll probably be up to our leadership to decide over the next few weeks here before the end of session whether it's going to be something we're going to take up or not.
All right. And Representative Simonson, we've talked before about the supplemental omnibus tax bill, but we might have some new viewers today. It's making its way through the legislature. It includes the so-called half and half tax for Duluth that Mayor Ness wanted. To talk a little bit about that supplemental omnibus tax bill. You're on the tax committee, so you're our resident expert.
Yeah. Well, it's most of that tax bill is further tax cuts for Minnesotans. I think it's $103 or $106 million total is what it left the House floor as. And most of that is property tax cuts, cuts for renters credit, some ag property relief. And then there's a few other things in there that don't cost money, such as the half and half tax that you referenced, which quite frankly is a good funding mechanism for what the city council and the mayor want to do with redevelopment of the western half of the city. So that bill is also in conference, and they've met a few times as well, and they're continuing to meet. But I think that this week will be a critical week for that bill, as well as some of these other bills that are in conference. But it's right now it's still looking pretty good, but we'll see what happens when it comes back.
We had a call from Karen in Duluth, and she was listening to our conversation about bonding, Representative Simonson, and her question is, when the state issues bonds, what interest rate do they pay, and who sets that interest rate?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have the answer for that off the top of my head.
Murphy, you've been around the legislature for a while. It's set by a rating agency, I believe, right?
And it's a low rate. At the present time, it's still a low rate. I think it's still under 3%.
The state gets a credit rating that is issued that allows the state to get a certain interest rate.
Right.
So.
But we have paid, at various times in our history, we've paid 10 or 11%. And so that's why in recent years we've been trying for large bonding bills, because the cost of borrowing the money is still so cheap.
Representative Sundin, maybe you have some input on the bonding question?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what those rates are right now, but I know the borrowing rate is the highest, or the credit rating of the state is the highest it's been in recent years. We took a fall in it for about 10 years there, and we're back on top.
Would the finance commissioner perhaps be a person that the Karen could contact? Is that be the place to call the state finance commissioner? You might be able to get a more specific answer than we could give you today. But thanks to Karen for that question. Alan from Duluth is calling. He's wondering about with the minimum wage indexing provision now being passed, in the legislators' opinions, will that be adequate? Representative Metsa, maybe give viewers a little background first about the minimum wage issue.
Yeah, and so we recently passed the minimum wage, and it'll be stepping up to $9.50 over the next few years, and the inflationary aspect will be coming on in 2018. And so I think, you know, for people, is it adequate? I guess that's up to, you know, a lot of different personal opinion. But it comes a long way from where we were and goes a long way towards in the future, making sure that when the price of groceries rise and you know, the price of school rises, so do the minimum wage right along with it.
Representative Sundin?
I think it was back in 1973, the duties for increasing or setting the minimum wage was that was removed from the commissioner, Department of Labor commissioner, and handed to the legislature. So I think this legislation that we passed this year is going to follow through and set a better labor standard going forward for decades. And it's going to be good for business, actually. They can predict their increases according to whatever the economy is doing. So.
Representative Simonson?
Yeah, I think, you know, the question about whether it's adequate or not will remain to be determined in the future, I think. But I think one of the pieces that it does do that we don't talk about a lot is that we raised the minimum wage, but we didn't do anything with the living wage. But even at its highest point, when it reaches that $9.50 an hour, if you think about what that equates to over a month, if you work a 40-hour week, you're still going to be making about $1,500 a month. That's working full-time at $9.50 an hour. And it is really difficult to live comfortably with a family on $1,500 a month when you think about housing and transportation and food and clothing and all the other needs that you have. So what I'm hoping that this will do is also impact our living wage and raise that up as well at the same time, kind of an indirect effect.
All right, we have a call from Jesse in Palo. I'm not sure, we don't have an Energy Committee member here, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer this question, but I'll throw it out there, maybe somebody will know about it. He's wondering if one of the legislators can explain the solar rebate plan in Minnesota, and he understands that there was a significant amount of that rebate that went to Xcel Energy, and is wondering if that money could be more evenly distributed in the future. Representative Metsa?
Yeah, I guess I'll say, hey, Jesse, first of all. I know which Jesse this is, a good guy, a good friend of mine. And we do have a rate structure that was put in place that didn't allow for much of the use in greater Minnesota. And I know that we have been working on a few amendments and really need to get that language in place. I couldn't get to the specifics of the rates. The energy policy is fairly complicated, to say it nicely. So we do have a lot of work to do to continue to make it accessible for people in greater Minnesota especially, and you know, for both the consumer, the installer, and the companies, you know, to get that infrastructure in place. I know there's a lot of sub-metering and different laws that apply around that as well that will need to get addressed too. So Jesse, I'll just ask for your patience on this one. We do have some research getting done though on how to make it a little better, and as always your input is appreciated, and we'll keep talking on that.
Well, and you mentioned, or he mentions the industry aspect, but there is consumer rebates as well. If you install solar or I believe wind, you can get a rebate, but that can be expensive, so the rebate is very valuable. But we have a manufacturer on the Iron Range that makes solar panels as well, correct?
Correct, yep. We've got one in Mountain Iron, then there's one down in the metro area as well, I believe, that manufactures in Minnesota.
And there's someone up in Purcell's district also that is manufacturing solar panels.
All right, we've got a call from Patty in Finland, and she's wondering if any of the representatives are planning on being at the Labor Temple for a workers' memorial ceremony with Mayor Ness tomorrow. I know you all have to go to work tomorrow, but Representative Sundin?
I rarely miss that. There again, we will be in committee at 9 o'clock, some of us. Anyway, but it's a very important day in Duluth's labor community to recognize the people that have been killed on the job site in the last year. And last year we had a nice tribute to one of my union brothers that was killed on the job. It's a very sad day, but it serves as a reminder for people going to work safe and return to your families at the end of the day. And when you don't do that, it's certainly a sad day for all workers.
And I think, Patty, it also depends on what the weather is like in the morning. If it's freezing or snowing or slippery, we will have less incentive to go there rather than directly to St. Paul.
And Patty had a second question. We don't have anybody that serves on the Ag Committee here, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but she's wondering, is there a chance that the bill for GMO labeling will get anywhere this session? Does anybody know about that? Representative Metsa?
I don't know if it'll get taken up for sure, but I do know I'm signed on to the bill. I think it's good thing for consumer awareness. It's changed quite a bit as it's been
Can you give us a little background? What is GMO and what would that be about?
Genetically modified organisms, and so it would be adding, say if there's a company who makes some genetic changes to a food while it's being made, that you would have to put that in the labeling, much like your calories, fat content, and so I do think it is something we need to address on a national level. However, states got to send a signal, which is why I'm on the bill right now. When you get into labeling, you think of General Mills here in Minnesota and how cumbersome it would be if it was different in every state. So I do hope that we can send up the flare, letting people know we want it, but overall, again, that's going to be one of those things that we'll sort out in the last few weeks, and I would say that's above my pay grade as whether it's going to hit the floor or not, but I'm hopeful we can take it up.
Representative Murphy?
I checked on that bill this week also, and there's still the Minnesota Department of Agriculture still has some issues with it, so it's very doubtful that anything meaningful will happen. I will bet that there will be an amendment or two tried, but I don't think that there will be major changes.
All right. And Representative Sundin, we talked about this the last time you were on the show, but Gary from Cloquet is wondering, will the Big Lake Sanitary District's request for bonding be approved by the legislature? And where's that at right now? I know you talked about that last time you were here.
The money for that, $4.5 million, is in the original $850 million bonding package, and we're just waiting for the approval of that. I'm very anxious to see that happen, and I'd bet my paycheck on it.
All right, well, that's a pretty positive confirmation. Sounds like Gary will get what he's looking for there. Let's see, the Senate, again, last week passed a bill banning online lottery ticket sales. Minnesota's the first in the nation. Don't know if the House has dealt with this yet, but I wanted just some reaction to that. Representative Simonson, online lottery sales, what is your opinion about that? Do you think that's something the state should be involved in?
So we had this bill in the tax committee last week, so we had a really lengthy debate about it. Actually, it was a very interesting debate. And the bill essentially would, no longer allow the sales of these lottery tickets online. But the question is whether the Minnesota State Lottery ever had the authority to do it in the first place. In some sense, it seems like they just kind of took the initiative and started doing it. And there are some legislators that think that they never had the authority to do that. So this bill essentially would clarify what they think was the original intent, was to not allow that without legislature approval. So I would be very surprised if this bill doesn't make it all the way through. And there's a revenue question there, but there's also a behavior and an addiction question there as well. And that's, I think, the one thing that we don't really want to facilitate.
Representative Metsa?
I would just say I hope it at this point doesn't go through. I think it needs quite a bit more vetting, and I think Representative Simonson brought up some really good points. The other thing for me, though, with that is the fact that when you're in the store, you can purchase with cash only. How are you purchasing online? Is it discriminatory towards other potential people that want to play the lottery? Oftentimes the funding goes towards some good causes, but overall I think we need to be really careful about our public policy around how we're letting people access gambling. And I see that more like the gambling that was shut down on the federal level, the online poker, on different things like that got quite a few people and a little deeper than they anticipated.
Representative Sundin?
Another piece of that puzzle would be if you've got your credit card laying around the house and you've got a teenage kid or somebody that's not authorized to use that card otherwise, there's nothing stopping them from running up a gambling bill on your credit card, and I could never be a part of that.
Well, and I believe that's also one of the reasons why they don't allow purchase of the tickets at the gas station or wherever you're buying it with the credit card. It's meant to keep people from going into debt. If they've got the cash, I guess the theory is at least they're not going into debt to buy the ticket. All right. This week, Representative Murphy, the House passed an election bill with something called electronic rosters, which I read about it and I never, it confused me. So I'd like to hear what your take is on, or one of the legislators' take on the election bill that was passed and what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to do. I'm not the smartest guy, so this one confused me.
Electronic rosters are so that the people, the judges at a voting site,
Election judges?
would be able to have a computer there, and they would be able to be hooked up to the Secretary of State's office and have all the information on computer to of where people live and where they should be voting and that kind of thing. And it was the Secretary of State's initiative, and it's passed through lots of committees.
And now it's passed through the House.
Now it's passed through the House of Representatives. Not as it was originally, but in more restrictive form. There are still some people that have questions, and I'm part of that group, in that people should be allowed to vote if they're registered. And it's true, you might have a computer, the judge might have a computer, but does that mean that all election judges then have to be technologically up to a certain standard on how to use the computer
So
and that kind of thing?
It's a training issue.
And so but we are in the 21st century, and so the bill is fine.
Representative Metsa?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to add, you know, with any election bill, the governor's made it pretty clear that it has to have bipartisan support too. So a lot of our stuff is not controversial when it's coming through the pipeline, leaving the House floor or the Senate floor, because the governor said he wouldn't sign anything without bipartisan support.
All right, and Representative Metsa, there was a bill this week to regulate so-called payday lending terms passed by the House after extensive debate. What's in that bill and why such an extensive debate? What's controversial about it?
So basically it limited, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it limited the amount of interest you could put on a short-term loan for a payday loan. And you know, one of the things I actually really found interesting, I had constituents who had sent in letters on it, and you know, a few generic blue forms, and I called all of them back, every single one, and not one person remembered signing the petition to allow the payday lender to keep the same practices. And so after a conversation with each of the people, I decided that maybe it was a good thing to move forward and put some things in place to protect consumers. You know, when people get in a hard time, you want to be able to access funds to get out of that, but at a reasonable level.
So this bill would regulate, put caps, Representative Simonson, on the lending rates, the terms, that type of thing?
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces of the bill is that it caps the number of times per year that you can do this. Right now it's unlimited. So if you get paid, you know, 26 times a year, in theory you could do this 26 times a year. And that's the problem that we're seeing, is that people are living, instead of payday to payday to payday, they're living loan to loan to loan to loan. And that interest that they're paying is just an unbelievable amount. So one of the things that this bill does is it limits that to 4 per year that you can actually, four loans that you can get in a calendar year, with the idea that, you know, that it will at least stop some of the bleeding. You know, the controversial part, I don't even know how controversial it was, but it was made to be controversial, that okay, what happens to the individual that gets through their fourth and now they need a fifth? What do? Well, there are other options, right? And I think our point was that we don't want to see you taking that fifth step and getting yourself into another loan with 200-300% interest on it.
Now, was there also some debate about in-person versus electronic methods of getting these loans, or maybe phone methods? I thought I read a little something about that. Representative Sundin?
Yeah, there's such a thing as internet lending. We heard some testimony about the risk of people going to Aruba and borrowing money from some unscrupulous operator outside the borders of the United States, and their credit rating, whatever, could be ruined due to that. But a lot of the lobbying against this bill came from the sources that Representative Metsa just referenced, people that maybe they signed up for a loan at some point, signed a piece of paper they didn't even know what they're signing, and it was actually authorizing them to contact the legislature and pander to protect that payday lending scheme that they have going. So a lot of the lobbying, a lot of the input that we got from supposedly citizens, that was actually false information.
And Representative Simonson, does the state currently regulate these payday lenders? There must be some state oversight, but not enough in some legislators' minds?
There is not nearly enough, right? I mean, that's, I think, what has been part of the problem is that they have a lucrative business, right? There's no question about that, and they're taking advantage of people. Anytime that you're paying, or you're charging a customer 200-300+% interest, to somebody that really can't afford it, that's a problem. So I think we made a good step. I think we need to, in the future, take a look at these interest rates again. I don't think we're done with this issue, but I think we did make a good first step.
And that brings up a good question, because I know over the years there have been a lot of these initiatives, let's call them, where there have been form letters sent into legislators. And I just wanted to bring up, for all of your opinion, what is the best way for citizens to register their support or opposition for a bill in your mind? I mean, personal contact, Representative Sundin?
A handwritten letter. I think we covered this at one other time, but a handwritten letter, maybe followed up by a phone call or vice versa. Communicate to us twice that you're serious about this. But the emails that I get, if it's a Form 1, it's gone. I will delete it. I try to respond to anybody in my district, of course, but if it's a canned one, I'll delete it. A handwritten letter or a personal phone call, that'd be terrific. Or all our information is out there on the internet for anyone to available for anyone. So.
And Representative Murphy, I imagine over the years you've probably gotten hundreds of form letters mailed to you on a particular issue. Does that make an impact on you when you see many people, maybe even in your district, have signed those letters? Or would you rather know that they wrote it in their own words?
Well, I like them writing in their own words, but of course it makes an impact if they're sending it. But there's modern methods now where they don't even have to send it, they just have to agree to send it, and somebody will, like it's Michelle from Hermantown, and then it's our address for the address from some electronic way of doing it. And so we don't know who Michelle is, we don't know where Michelle lives, but it says that Michelle is from Hermantown. There's no way to call Michelle back to find out why did she send this form letter. And so that's, I think, what Representative Sundin is talking about in when we delete, and so they don't get an answer. And that's, one of the reasons people contact us is so that we will get back to them. And I admit that I don't get back to people really fast. But I read my emails every single day. And then sometimes they get put in a folder waiting for action by the legislature so I can get them back to them when the bill is finally passed, that kind of thing, especially if they're form letters. But I do read them. But when they don't have their full name and address and phone number so that I can call them, and if I have a question about what they're writing about, that makes it more suspect.
Well, that answers, we had 2 calls today from Troy in Hermantown and Larry in Hermantown, both wondering why you hadn't gotten back to them yet, and you just gave a reply. You've read their letters, and you eventually will get back to them.
I hope so. What was it about, Troy?
Troy said he contacted you a few weeks ago, and he's wondering why you haven't gotten back to him, but he didn't say what it was about.
And if Troy was listening earlier in the thing, we have to remember that we have at least three committees that we have to go to every day. We have, and those are an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And we have session on the floor every day now. And we have only a third of a person to help us directly with our constituent work. And sometimes when there's 50 people that want to talk with us during the day, there's no time in the daylight hours. But I will try.
And Larry from Hermantown he had written you a letter about high property taxes on seniors and was wondering why you haven't gotten back to him.
Well, Larry, we're hoping that the property taxes now, we're hoping for another property tax cut for seniors and renters and small businesses will be in tax 2. And we're working on this, and we've already had in the tax bill, first tax bill, and last spring's tax bill, a little bonuses for people with high property taxes. And we're working on it, and we still have the property tax rebate. That's part. And I talked to a constituent yesterday that told me that he was getting $700 and some back on his property tax, on his property tax bill. And so we're working for your cause, Larry.
All right, Representative Metsa.
Yeah, I'd say, again, with the emails, the bulk email forms are tough to navigate through. Sometimes you have similar circumstances like I described with the blue forms for the payday lending, where you get someone who doesn't know that they've signed on. And I actually, there's a database we have access to that allows us to go in and look up someone if they left only a first name or something, but it's very time consuming to get back and quite frustrating if the person actually doesn't remember sending it. But overall, I'd say the best way again would be telephone. Call the office, call my cell phone. I've given that out to a lot of folks back home. And that's generally the best way to get a hold of us. And sometimes on some of these folks, if you have a bill that's coming through with, say, property taxes like we just discussed, there might be 2 or 3 different bills moving. And I actually kind of store some of the letters in different folders, say taxes, jobs, if they have a jobs question. And then as the session progresses, if it was an emergency situation for the constituent, I'm able to send them back what we actually passed in the final form. So I prefer to do that unless they're looking for a quick answer. But overall, I'd say phone is definitely the best way to get a hold of someone down at the Capitol.
All right, sounds good. Ted from Duluth has a question about the transportation bill, and we've got 3 legislators that serve on transportation policy or finance here. I'll let Representative Sundin answer first. He's wondering what was in the transportation bill, and I know that there hasn't been a lot with transportation this session. Representative Sundin?
Not nearly enough. I can tell you that right now. There's some policy changes, lots of little things. I think we passed the quarters of commerce. That was the biggest thing that came through last year that identified some areas in the state that did get some funding. But looking ahead, this is going to be one of the biggest things that the legislature will be dealing with in the next couple of years. And it's a very, very serious situation. We have a lot of hundreds and maybe thousands of bridges here in the state of Minnesota that are not up to par. The road surfaces are in dire need of reconstruction, and it's going to take some money. We're going to be looking at some different funding mechanisms and try to make those funding mechanisms more sustainable going forward. A simple raising of the gas tax is not enough. So it's a big deal. Right in my district, the state of Minnesota has invested over $30 million in the last couple of years with the reconstruction of I-35 and maintenance of Highway 33, and there's some interchange work going on right there. Some more, a couple $1 million worth of resurfacing down on Highway 73, but that doesn't carry forward. And every community is touched by this, so the next couple of years, that's going to be one of our biggest challenges.
And Representative Simonson, anything in the area of transportation policy this session of significance that viewers might be interested in?
There's a lot of things, actually. I mean, they're not huge things, but there's a number of things in that bill that we passed off the floor that's still in conference right now. So we'll see what it comes back as, because you just never know what'll come out of there. But I do think there's some good initiatives. I know Representative Metsa had a great initiative for rail yard safety, lighting issues. But there's a number of things in there. One of the things I think that's kind of important to think about is, Representative Sundin is right. As we go forward into the next session and the subsequent sessions thereafter, transportation is going to be very high on the list of things that need attention. MnDOT, which just really kind of takes a look at state roads and bridges across Minnesota, they've identified over the next 20 years a $12 billion deficiency, which you cannot make up with a gas tax, not a gas tax that anybody would ever consider. So he's right, it's going to require some really creative funding mechanisms, how we go forward just with maintenance. And we're not even talking about constructing new roads or new bridges. It's just maintaining what we have right now. So that's going to be important. And I think that it's going to be very high on our priority list as we go forward.
Would the state ever consider perhaps toll roads, Representative Simonson? Does that come up maybe as a way of paying for new road construction?
There is nothing that's off the table right now, I think, in terms of the discussion. I think as we go over this, interim, once we get out of session and before we've got an election this year, I think that this is going to be a topic of discussion all across Minnesota for everybody. So hopefully when we come back in January that we've got some good ideas and some fresh ideas, we can start vetting them. But I don't think anything should be off the table right now.
I think people have to remember also that we used to get a lot more federal money for transportation, varieties of transportation, than we get right now. And it's been at least 10 years since we had an abundance of federal money for transportation. And it's something that we can't, Minnesota by itself can't get out of the $12 billion hole.
Representative Metsa?
Yeah, I would say, looking at it too, we're one of the states that in federal tax dollars, we give more than we get back. And so when you look at it in that sense, we do have to get creative. I won't get into too many details with it, but like Representative Simonson said, we shouldn't leave anything off the table, and we do have to structurally fix some stuff. And I do think that be great to see the feds step up to the plate and start to work a little bit better together out in Washington. And I think we're kind of seeing a vacuum back here specifically in Minnesota because Chairman Oberstar as well, back when earmarking didn't have as bad of a name, when it was a project for your community that was needed, we had the significant fortune of having him here to be able to bring that money to Minnesota, and we're kind of seeing that loss of seniority in Washington right now.
And Representative Simonson mentioned you had a rail yard safety bill, Representative Metsa. Talk about that, and also the fact that you're not just dealing with highways in the transportation committees, you're dealing with all transportation in Minnesota. Yeah,
so basically the bill in a nutshell, on many of our rail yards around the state, there is no lighting at all. And you have people out there working to connect the trains, make sure the brakes are working, and you want to make sure that there's no brake lines dripping, and all the parts are hooked up. We've seen a significant increase, I think, nationwide in both rail traffic and with that rail accidents. And so I think with the volatile oil that they're carrying from the Dakotas through the state, we've got another bill in that regulates some of that. And this one specifically just makes the train yards where there is no lighting currently, it would mandate that there would be lighting for those inspections.
And Representative Sundin, speaking of oil transportation, there's some pipeline projects in northeastern Minnesota being proposed by Enbridge. Would the state get involved in that? Would the legislature, for an example, get involved in those types of issues? Maybe that's more of an energy policy issue?
No, actually is it a transportation issue as well and a commerce issue as well. But back up to the railroads just for a second here. There's about 90-some thousand rail cars transporting hazardous materials, not necessarily all oil, but in the United States, and 79,000 of those are of the old generation tankers. Burlington Northern has invested in some of their own rail cars, 5,000 upgraded, heavier shelled tankers, but there's 79,000 of these, I'm not going to call them substandard, but older design, and those are the ones that went over in Dakota and over in Quebec as well, that caused the disasters there. And the bad part about those vessels is if they rupture in a populated area, it's bad enough when you get the oil spill, but this Balkan oil is a little bit more volatile than some others. Gets into a sewer system in a municipality, and pretty soon you have the whole town on fire. It'll happen sooner or later. You know, you hate to see that. It's kind of a doomsday way of looking at it, but we have to require higher standards for those tankers as well. The pipeline transmission of oil is actually a lot safer, but the routing of those pipelines is another story. We've got some corridors running right through 11A, Carleton County, pretty much, and we haven't had any nasty incidents there, but the one company is upgrading the one line, and it'll be higher pressure, more oil flowing through, and then there's another proposed new route as well. And I'm fully in favor of energy corridors. There's no reason that I see where you couldn't have pipelines underneath, power lines up above, and you're utilizing those corridors and those right-of-ways fully, rather than chopping up the whole county.
So existing corridors rather than having to negotiate with property owners, as is happening now.
I do recognize the need for this oil is going to move, and it's going to move through here. And if we can do it safely in pipelines and in prescribed areas, so we don't end up with this battle every time there's a new pipeline coming through. Say we've got 2 or 3 nice corridors, let's use them wisely.
And Representative Metsa?
Yeah, just quickly, and to build on what Representative Sundin said, the actual part that the Transportation Committee took up too in regard to the pipeline, and this would be for Enbridge and others, is actual safety protocol to put in place. So if there's a leak, what is our state protocol? What is the protocol for the rail line or the pipeline itself? And what is the protocol for a citizen who has that running through their property? Who do they call? So we've been vetting some of that, and I think it'll come back in good shape and, you know, put a little perspective in regards to safety with those high pressure systems running through people's communities.
All right, and Representative Sundin.
Just to follow up, there's a great need for these corridors. Down in the southern part of 11A, we've got some very, very successful organic farms and very, very clean farms, and we'd like to keep them clean. And that's kind of highlights the importance for putting these pipelines in their place and maintain right-of-ways, energy right-of-ways.
All right, we just have about a little over a minute left. Representative Simonson, I have a question from Gary in Cloquet. You're on the tax committee, so I'm going to give you this one, so you might have knowledge of this. He's wondering about your views on cigarettes made in the state of Nebraska being imported into the state of Minnesota's Leech Lake Reservation and avoiding Minnesota state taxes. I believe the reservations are exempt, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Representative Simonson?
Actually, every reservation in Minnesota, with the exception of Leech Lake, has agreed with the Department of Revenue, has an agreement with the Department of Revenue about sharing, okay? Department of Revenue and the Leech Lake Band continue to negotiate that. That's in process. Actually, I think it was in the paper today, if I'm not mistaken, but
Might be where that question came from.
it could be where it came from, right? But yeah, so essentially now they're to the point where the band has refused to collect the tax. So the state of Minnesota has refused to pay them their money. So there'll be some further negotiations there, but every other tribe in the state has complied with the Department of Revenue.
So in your opinion, then, there's likely that there would be an agreement reached eventually?
There has to be an agreement reached. I mean, the whole idea behind it was we want to make sure that the price on cigarettes is not about generating revenue, it's more about making sure that the price is high enough to try to not stimulate smoking.
All right, well, I want to thank all of you for being here today. Representative Simonson, Representative Sundin, Representative Murphy, Representative Metsa, thank you very much. I'm afraid we have run out of time this week on Minnesota Legislative Report. I'd like to again thank all of the lawmakers who are making this show program, a great panel today. Thanks to everyone who called in with their questions. I think we got to just about every one of them. Please join us again next week on Sunday, May 4th. That will be our final program of this session. For the crew here at WDSE, WRPT, I'm Greg Grell. Have a great evening.